You survived a toxic person, and now you're different. Colder, sharper, more guarded. You don't trust like you used to. You don't open up like you used to. You don't give people the benefit of the doubt anymore. And everyone around you notices. They tell you to let it go, to move on, to stop being so defensive. They say you've changed, and not in a good way. But Jung understood what they don't. You didn't change because you're damaged. You changed because you adapted. And adaptation, even when it looks like hardness, is intelligence. Because surviving a toxic person isn't just about getting away from them. It's about what happens to your personality in the process. The parts of you that shut down, the parts that grew sharper, the parts that will never be the same. This isn't about healing. It's not about closure. It's about understanding that the person you became in order to survive is now the person you have to live with, and that person doesn't feel like you anymore. This is the psychology of how surviving toxic people changes your personality, and why going back to who you were before isn't possible. Jung believed that trauma doesn't just happen to you, it reorganizes you. It changes the structure of your personality at a level most people never acknowledge. When you survive a toxic person, whether it's a parent, a partner, a friend, a boss, your psyche doesn't just heal and move on, it adapts. And adaptation means becoming a different version of yourself. The version of you that existed before the toxic relationship had a certain openness, a certain trust, a certain belief that people were generally good, or at least safe enough to let in. That version of you is gone, not temporarily, permanently, because the part of your brain that governs trust, connection, and safety learned something it can't unlearn. People can destroy you while smiling. They can betray you while saying they love you. They can make you feel crazy for noticing what they're doing. So your personality shifts. You become hypervigilant. You read people differently now. You notice micro-expressions, tone shifts, inconsistencies. You see patterns that other people miss because you had to. Survival required it. And now, even when you're safe, you can't turn it off. You walk into a room and immediately assess threat levels. You meet someone new, and within minutes you've cataloged every red flag. You hear a certain tone of voice, and your nervous system spikes before your mind even registers why. This isn't paranoia. This is what happens when your personality reorganizes itself around the central truth that danger can wear a friendly face. And once you know that, you can't unknow it. You didn't choose to become colder. You were trained into it. Maybe the toxic person punished you every time you showed vulnerability. Maybe they used your emotions against you, took your honesty and weaponized it, took your trust and made you regret it. So you learned showing softness is dangerous, admitting need is dangerous, letting someone see the real you is handing them ammunition. Maybe they gaslighted you, made you question your own reality, told you that what you saw, heard, and felt wasn't real, that you were too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. So you learned your perception can't be trusted, and if your perception can't be trusted, you have to control everything. You have to be 3 steps ahead. You have to never be caught off guard again. Maybe they isolated you, slowly cut you off from people who would have told you the truth, made you dependent on their version of reality, made you believe that leaving would mean losing everything. So you learned connection is a trap, dependency is weakness. The only person you can rely on is yourself, and even that feels uncertain sometimes. The personality you have now isn't random. It's the result of systematic conditioning. You became this way because staying soft would have destroyed you. Staying trusting would have kept you trapped. Staying open would have meant more pain than you could survive. So you closed, you hardened, you became the kind of person who doesn't let people in easily, and everyone around you treats that like a flaw. But Jung would say it's not a flaw, it's a scar. And scars are proof you survived something that could have killed you. Here's what your personality looks like after surviving a toxic person. You don't trust easily anymore. People have to prove themselves over and over before you let them close. And even then, there's a part of you that's always watching, always waiting for the moment they reveal who they really are. You're colder than you used to be, not because you want to be, but because warmth feels dangerous. Warmth is what got you hurt before, so you keep people at a distance. You're polite, functional, professional, but you don't let them in. And when they ask why you're so distant, you can't even explain it, because to you, distance feels like safety. You overanalyze everything, every conversation, every interaction, every shift in tone or energy. You replay moments in your head looking for hidden meanings, not because you're paranoid, but because you learn that the danger is always in what people don't say, in the subtext, in the smile that doesn't reach the eyes. You have a hard time relaxing. Even when things are good, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You can't fully enjoy peace because peace has always been temporary, It's always been the calm before the next storm, so you stay braced, always ready, never fully present. You've become blunt, maybe even harsh. You don't sugarcoat things anymore. You don't perform niceness. You say what you mean because you spent too long watching someone twist your words, and now you'd rather be misunderstood for your honesty than manipulated for your politeness. And people don't understand this version of you. They think you're bitter, closed off, difficult. They tell you to let your guard down, to give people a chance, to stop being so negative. But they don't know what it took for you to survive. They don't know that this version of you, the one they think is broken, is actually the version that saved your life. Jung would point to the shadow here, the part of you that holds everything you can't consciously accept about who you've become. For the person who survived a toxic relationship, the shadow holds the soft version of you, the trusting version, the version that believed in people and didn't see threats everywhere. And you've buried that version so deep because letting it out feels like suicide, because that version of you is the one who got hurt. That version is the one who didn't see it coming. That version is weak, naive, and dangerous to your survival. So the shadow holds it, and because you won't integrate it, it leaks. It leaks as rage, not loud rage, quiet rage, the kind that sits in your chest like a stone, the kind that makes you want to scream at people who trust too easily, who give too much, who don't see the danger you see everywhere. It leaks as loneliness. You're surrounded by people, but you don't feel close to anyone, because closeness requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like handing someone a knife and hoping they don't use it. So you stay alone, not because you want to, but because it's the only way you know how to stay safe. It leaks as envy. You see people who can still trust, who can still love openly, who can still believe that people are good, and part of you hates them for it, not because they're wrong, but because you'll never get to be that way again. And that loss is so deep you can't even look at it directly. It leaks as self-blame. Late at night when the defenses come down, you wonder if you're the problem, if you become too hard, too cold, too broken, if the toxic person didn't just hurt you but fundamentally ruined you. And that thought is almost worse than the original trauma, because it means they won, even after you left. The shadow doesn't punish you for surviving. It punishes you for believing that survival means you're still the same person, but you're not, and pretending otherwise just makes the split deeper. Here's what happens when you carry this personality shift without understanding it. First, you isolate, not intentionally, but inevitably, because the standards you now have for people are so high that almost no one meets them. You need consistency, honesty, transparency, zero manipulation, and most people can't do that, not because they're toxic, but because they're human, so you push everyone away. And then you're alone, and the loneliness confirms what you've always feared, that you're unlovable, that something about you is fundamentally wrong. Second, you become rigid. The flexibility you once had is gone. You need control, predictability, clear boundaries. And when life doesn't cooperate, when people don't behave the way you need them to, you shut down. You can't adapt, you can't bend, because bending to you feels like breaking, so you stay hard, and that hardness makes it impossible for anything new to grow. Third, you lose access to joy, not because you don't want it, but because joy requires letting your guard down. It requires being present, being open, being surprised, and you can't afford any of that, so joy becomes something you watch other people experience. Something that used to be available to you but isn't anymore, and you don't even know how to get it back. Jung said something that applies here even though he was talking about something broader. He said the unconscious doesn't forget, it holds everything. And if you don't integrate what happened to you, if you don't make peace with the personality shift, the unconscious will keep trying to resolve it, through dreams, through anxiety, through the same patterns repeating until you finally look at what you've been avoiding. And what you've been avoiding is this: the person you became in order to survive is not the person you want to be, but you don't know how to be anyone else, because going back feels impossible. And moving forward feels like betraying the version of you that fought so hard to get you here. So you stay stuck in a personality that doesn't fit anymore but feels like the only option, and that's not survival, that's slow erasure. Here's how you start integrating the personality shift without pretending it didn't happen. First, stop treating your coldness like a problem. It's not a flaw, it's a boundary. You became cold because warmth was weaponized against you. That doesn't mean you have to stay cold forever, but it does mean you get to honor why you needed it. Your coldness protected you, it still protects you, and there's no shame in that. Second, separate hypervigilance from intuition. Hypervigilance is your nervous system scanning for threats that aren't there. Intuition is your deep knowing about what's real. They feel similar, but they're not the same. Hypervigilance makes you exhausted. Intuition makes you clear. Learning to tell the difference takes time, but it's the only way you'll stop seeing danger in every shadow. Third, recognize that you can be soft again without being naive. The version of you that got hurt wasn't weak. That version just didn't know what you know now. But now you do. You know what red flags look like. You know what manipulation sounds like. You know how to leave before it gets worse. That knowledge doesn't go away just because you let someone in. You can be open and still be protected. Those things aren't opposites. Fourth, grieve the person you were before, not because that person was better, but because that loss is real. You'll never trust the same way again. You'll never love the same way again. And that's not wrong, but it is sad. And sadness that doesn't get acknowledged becomes bitterness. So let yourself mourn. Let yourself feel the weight of what was taken from you. Not so you stay stuck in it, but so you can finally put it down. Fifth, understand that healing doesn't mean going back. It means going forward as someone new. You're not trying to recover the old you. You're trying to build a version of yourself that can hold both the softness you lost and the strength you gained. That version doesn't exist yet. You have to create it. And creation takes time and mistakes, and a willingness to be uncertain about who you're becoming. Here's the truth Jung understood, but most people refuse to accept. Surviving a toxic person doesn't just change your circumstances, it changes you at the core, in ways that can't be undone. You didn't just learn new information, you reorganized your entire understanding of how the world works, of how people work, of what safety means and whether it even exists. And that reorganization is permanent, not because you're broken, but because you're different. You see things now that you can't unsee. You know things now that you can't unknow. And everyone wants you to go back to who you were, to be lighter, easier, more trusting, but that person doesn't exist anymore, and trying to resurrect them is just another way of betraying yourself. The personality you have now is the result of survival, and survival isn't pretty, it's not soft, it's not easy to be around, but it kept you alive, and that matters more than whether people are comfortable with how you've changed. Jung believed that individuation, becoming who you truly are, requires integrating everything. The soft and the hard, the open and the closed, the version of you that trusted too much and the version that trusts too little. You're not supposed to go back, you're supposed to go through, to take everything you learned, everything you became, and build something new with it, something that honors both the innocence you lost and the strength you gained. Most people who survive toxic relationships spend the rest of their lives apologizing for how they changed, trying to be softer so people will like them again, trying to be who they were so they can fit back into a world that feels foreign now. But you don't owe anyone that. You don't owe anyone the version of you that didn't survive. You survived a toxic person, and it changed you. Maybe you're colder now, maybe you're harder, maybe you don't trust like you used to. But that's not damage, that's adaptation. And adaptation is how you stayed alive when staying soft would have destroyed you. Jung believed that trauma reorganizes the psyche, that surviving something doesn't leave you unchanged, it leaves you different, and different doesn't mean broken. So here's the truth, you're not supposed to go back to who you were, you're supposed to become someone new, someone who can hold both the pain of what happened and the power of what you became because of it. The person you are now isn't the problem. The problem is living in a world that wants you to apologize for surviving.